I'd been teaching high school for 8 years when I met Sarah. She was in my sophomore English class, and from day one, she stood out. Not because she was the smartest or the loudest, but because she had this infectious energy that could light up the entire room. She'd walk in every morning with this huge smile, chatting with everyone around her, asking about my weekend, commenting on the books we were reading. She was one of those students who made teaching worth it. Sarah had this way of seeing things differently. When we read To Kill a Mockingbird, while other students focused on the obvious themes, she'd point out details I'd never noticed in 15 years of teaching that book. She'd stay after class sometimes just to talk about literature, about life, about her dreams of becoming a writer. Her essays were always thoughtful, creative, full of this optimism that reminded me why I loved working with teenagers. That's why I noticed immediately when something changed. It was subtle at first. Sarah would still smile and participate, but there was something different in her eyes. The spark was dimming. She started showing up to class a few minutes late, which was completely unlike her. She'd always been one of the first ones in the room, books already out, ready to dive into whatever we were discussing that day. The lateness got worse. 5 minutes became 10, then 15. Other teachers started mentioning it too. Mrs. Rodriguez from her math class, Mr. Thompson from chemistry. We'd compare notes in the teacher's lounge, all of us concerned about this girl who used to be so punctual, so engaged. I tried to catch her eye during class, give her encouraging smiles, but she'd look away quickly. During group discussions, she'd participate when called on, but she stopped volunteering answers. The girl who used to have her hand up constantly, eager to share her thoughts, was fading away right in front of us. It was a particularly cold February morning when I decided I had to do something. Sarah walked in 20 minutes late, her cheeks red from the cold, her hair messy like she'd been running. She mumbled an apology and slid into her seat, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I could see other students whispering, giving her looks. The social dynamics were starting to shift too. After class, I asked her to stay behind. "Sarah, is everything okay? You've been late a lot lately, and I'm worried about you." She fidgeted with her backpack straps, still not meeting my eyes. "I'm fine, Mr. Davis, just having some trouble with my alarm clock." I'd heard that excuse 100 times from other students, but coming from Sarah, it felt different, desperate. "Look, you know you can talk to me, right? If something's going on at home or with friends, whatever it is." She nodded quickly. "Yeah, I know. But really, I'm fine. I'll try to be on time tomorrow." But she wasn't. If anything, it got worse. Some days she'd walk in halfway through the period, and I could see the embarrassment on her face. The confident, happy girl I'd known was disappearing, replaced by someone who seemed to be carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. I started paying closer attention to the little things. Her clothes were still clean, but they were the same few outfits rotated over and over. She'd stopped participating in the lunch line, instead sitting by herself with just a bag of chips, or sometimes nothing at all. During parent-teacher conferences, her mom was a no-show, which was unusual because she'd always been involved before. Sarah stumbled in almost 30 minutes late, and she looked exhausted. Actually exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled, and I noticed her shoes were soaked through. It had been raining that morning, but not enough to soak someone's feet unless they'd been walking for a very long time. After class, I didn't give her a choice. "Sarah, we need to talk, now." She looked like she might cry, but she nodded and waited until the other students filed out. "What's really going on? And please don't tell me it's your alarm clock, because I know that's not true." She stood there for a long moment, and I could see her internal struggle. Finally, her shoulders sagged in defeat. "I've been walking to school," she said quietly. "Walking? From where? You live like 6 miles away." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It takes about an hour and a half if I walk fast." My mind was racing. "Sarah, why are you walking? What happened to your bike? You used to ride it every day." That's when she broke down. Not the dramatic, loud crying you see in movies, but the quiet, heartbreaking kind where someone's trying desperately to hold it together and failing. "My mom sold it," she said through her tears. "She sold your bike? Why would she do that?" Sarah wiped her eyes with her sleeve and looked out the window. "She needed money." "Money for what?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless. "For alcohol." Those 2 words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd suspected family problems, maybe financial difficulties, but this was worse than I'd imagined. I'd dealt with students from difficult home situations before, but something about hearing it from Sarah, this bright, optimistic girl, made it feel more personal. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. That's not fair to you at all." She shrugged, like she'd accepted this as normal. "It's okay. I just have to leave earlier to get here on time." "It's not okay," I said firmly. "You shouldn't have to walk an hour and a half to school because your mother sold your transportation for alcohol. That's not your responsibility." She looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. It was gratitude mixed with fear, like she was grateful someone finally understood, but terrified of what that might mean. We talked for another 15 minutes. She told me more about the situation at home. Her mom's drinking had gotten progressively worse over the past year. Her dad had left when she was 12, and it was just the 2 of them now. Sarah had been trying to hold everything together, making excuses for her mom's behavior, covering for her when she missed work, dealing with the financial consequences. "I can't tell anyone," she said. "If people find out, they might take me away from her, and she needs me." That broke my heart. This 15-year-old girl girl thought she was responsible for taking care of her alcoholic mother. She was sacrificing her education, her health, her future, because she felt guilty about abandoning someone who was clearly not taking care of her. After Sarah left, I sat in my empty classroom for another hour, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't just ignore this situation, but I also couldn't betray her trust. She'd been brave enough to confide in me, and I didn't want to make her regret that decision. I decided to start small. The next morning, I arrived at school early and went straight to Principal Martinez's office. "I need to talk to you about one of my students," I said. "Sarah Collins. She's been having some transportation issues." I explained the situation without going into too much detail about the home life. I focused on the practical problem, a good student who was struggling to get to school consistently because she didn't have reliable transportation. Principal Martinez listened carefully. She was in her 50s, had been an educator for almost 30 years, and she'd seen it all. She had this way of knowing when there was more to a story than what she was hearing. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I was thinking maybe the school could help her get a bike, from the emergency fund or through one of the community partnerships. She's a good kid who's dealing with a tough situation. Principal Martinez nodded slowly. "Let me make some calls." Within 2 days, we had a solution. There was a local bike shop that partnered with the school district to provide transportation for students in need. They donated a practically new mountain bike, sturdy enough for daily use, with a lock and even a helmet. I asked Sarah to stay after class again on Friday. "I have something for you," I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. I led her outside to where I'd left the bike chained to the rack near the main entrance. When she saw it, her reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. Her face lit up with genuine joy for the first time in months. She ran her hand along the handlebars like she couldn't believe it was real. "Is this for me?" "It's yours," I said, "from the school. You don't have to walk anymore." She hugged me then, and I could feel her shaking. When she pulled back, she had tears in her eyes, but these were happy tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." That weekend, I felt better than I had in months. I'd solved a problem. I'd helped a student who needed it. Sarah would be able to get to school on time, participate fully in her education, maybe even regain some of that spark I'd missed so much. Monday morning, Sarah walked into class on time with the biggest smile I'd seen from her all year. She looked like her old self again. She participated in our discussion about The Great Gatsby, stayed after class to ask about the upcoming essay assignment, and seemed genuinely happy. Tuesday was the same. Wednesday too. I started to think we'd turned a corner. Then Thursday came, and Sarah was late again. Not just a few minutes late, 25 minutes late, looking frazzled and upset. My heart sank. I caught her eye as she slipped into her seat, and she looked away immediately. After class, before I could ask her to stay, she was gone. Friday was worse. 30 minutes late, and she looked like she hadn't slept. The progress we'd made felt like it was evaporating. That afternoon, my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I usually didn't answer calls from numbers I didn't recognize during school hours, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" Silence for a moment, then a woman's voice, slurred and angry. "You fucking bastard. You think you can just—" The line went dead. I stared at my phone, confused. Wrong number, probably. Some drunk person dialing randomly. The calls continued over the weekend. Always from different numbers, always the same angry, intoxicated-sounding woman. The language was vile. Accusations I couldn't make sense of. Threats that were disturbing but vague. I started letting them go to voicemail, then deleting them without listening. By Monday, I'd received at least a dozen calls. I mentioned it to my wife, Susan, who suggested maybe it was a parent unhappy about a grade or some teenager playing pranks. "Should we call the police?" she asked. "Let's wait and see if it stops," I said. "It's probably nothing serious," but it wasn't stopping. If anything, the calls were getting more frequent and more vicious. Monday morning, Sarah was late again. This time, when I asked her to stay after class, she couldn't get away fast enough. "Sarah, wait." She stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "What happened to your bike?" Her shoulders tensed. "Nothing. It's fine." "Then why have you been late again?" She turned around slowly, and I could see she'd been crying recently. Her eyes were red and puffy. I can't ride it anymore." "Why not?" "Is it broken? We can get it fixed." She shook her head. "It's not broken. My mom, she took it." "Took it where?" Sarah's face crumpled. "She sold it, like the first one." The anger that shot through me was intense and immediate. This woman had sold her daughter's transportation twice now. How was that even legal? "Sarah, this has to stop. You can't keep walking to school, and your mother can't keep selling your things. Please don't make this a big deal," she said frantically. "Please, if you call social services or something, everything will get worse." "I'm not going to call social services," I said, though I was starting to think maybe someone should. "But we need to find a solution that your mom can't undo." We talked for a few more minutes, but Sarah was clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. She kept checking the clock, saying she needed to get home, that her mom would be worried. After she left, I sat in my classroom trying to make sense of the situation. Sarah's mother was not only an alcoholic, but she was actively sabotaging her daughter's education by selling her transportation for drinking money. The calls I'd been receiving suddenly made sense in a horrible way. I pulled out my phone and played one of the voicemails I hadn't deleted. "You sick fuck. Stay away from my daughter. I know what you're trying to do with those gifts. I see right through you, you pervert." My blood ran cold. Sarah's mother thought I was trying to, what? Groom her daughter? The bike, the concern for her education, the after-school conversations, somehow this woman had twisted my attempts to help into something sinister. I felt sick, not just because of the the false accusations, but because I realized how this must look to Sarah. Her mother was probably confronting her at home, accusing her of inappropriate behavior with her teacher, maybe even blaming her for accepting help. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I arrived at school early and went straight to Principal Martinez's office again. This time, I told her everything. The home situation, the mother's alcoholism, the bike being sold twice, and the phone calls I'd been receiving. Principal Martinez listened with increasing concern. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Davis, you did the right thing trying to help this girl, but this situation is beyond what we can handle as educators. We need to involve social services. Sarah specifically asked me not to do that. She's terrified of being taken away from her mother. I understand that, but Sarah is a minor in what sounds like an unsafe situation. Her mother is not providing basic care. She's actively hindering her education, and now she's making accusations against school personnel. We have to report this." I knew she was right, but I felt like I was betraying Sarah's trust. She'd confided in me because she thought I could help without making things worse. Instead, I was about to turn her world upside down. "Can we at least talk to Sarah first? Explain what we have to do and why?" Principal Martinez nodded. "We'll call her in during lunch. But Mr. Davis, I want you to know that you're not in any trouble here. What you did was appropriate and compassionate. This situation is not your fault." I knew that, logically, but emotionally, I felt responsible. If I'd just minded my own business, maybe Sarah would still be walking to school, but at least her home life wouldn't be imploding. During lunch, Sarah came to the principal's office looking terrified. She knew something was up the moment she saw both Principal Martinez and me sitting there. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble at all," Principal Martinez said gently. "But we need to talk about your situation at home." What followed was one of the most difficult conversations I'd ever been part of. Sarah broke down completely when we told her we had to contact social services. She begged us not to, promising she could handle things at home, saying her mom just needed time to get better. "She's not a bad person," Sarah sobbed. "She's just sick. The drinking makes her do things she doesn't mean to do." Principal Martinez explained that we were legally required to report suspected abuse or neglect, and that not providing adequate care for a minor fell under that category. "But they'll take me away from her," Sarah said. "And then what will happen to her? She needs me." "Sarah," I said carefully, "your mother is an adult. You're 15 years old. You shouldn't be responsible for taking care of her. She should be taking care of you." "You don't understand," she said desperately. "Before my dad left, he used to help her. He'd make sure she ate, make sure she got to work, clean up when she had bad nights. After he left, I had to do all of that. If I'm not there, she could hurt herself." The picture she painted was even worse than I'd imagined. This girl had been functioning as a caretaker for her alcoholic mother for 3 years. She was managing household responsibilities that no teenager should have to handle, all while trying to maintain her grades and navigate high school. Principal Martinez handled the rest of the conversation with incredible compassion. She explained that social services would do an investigation, that their goal wasn't to separate families, but to ensure children were safe, and that there were resources available to help Sarah's mother get treatment for her addiction. "What if she doesn't want treatment?" Sarah asked. "Then we'll figure out what's best for you," Principal Martinez said. "But Sarah, you deserve to be a teenager. You deserve to focus on your education and your future, not on managing an adult's addiction." After Sarah left to go back to class, Principal Martinez made the call to Child Protective Services. They said they'd send someone to the school the next day to interview Sarah, and they'd do a home visit within 48 hours. I went home that night feeling like I'd set something irreversible in motion. Susan tried to reassure me that I'd done the right thing, but I kept thinking about Sarah's face when she realized what was happening. The phone calls from Sarah's mother had stopped, which somehow made me more nervous, not less. The next day, a CPS worker named Jennifer Walsh came to the school around noon. She was probably in her 30s, professional but warm, and she had this calm energy that seemed designed to put people at ease. She interviewed Sarah for about an hour. I wasn't present for the conversation, but Principal Martinez told me afterward that Sarah had been honest about the situation at home, though she'd continued to defend her mother throughout the interview. Miss Walsh also interviewed me about my interactions with Sarah, the reasons I'd been concerned, and the phone calls I'd received from her mother. She took notes on everything and assured me that I'd acted appropriately as a mandated reporter. "These situations are never easy," she said, "but you gave this girl a voice when she didn't feel safe speaking up on her own. That matters." Friday afternoon, Miss Walsh conducted the home visit. Sarah wasn't in school that day, which was concerning but not surprising. I spent the entire weekend wondering what had happened, how Sarah was doing, whether she was safe. Monday morning came and went without Sarah showing up to class. Tuesday too. By Wednesday, I was seriously worried. I asked Principal Martinez if she'd heard anything from CPS, but she said these investigations could take time. Thursday morning, Sarah finally came back to school, but she looked worse than ever. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes looked like she'd slept in them, and she had dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping much at all. She avoided eye contact with me completely during class. When I tried to approach her after the period ended, she practically ran out of the room. Friday, she was absent again. The following Monday, Principal Martinez called me into her office with an update from CPS. "The initial investigation has been completed," she said. "Sarah's mother is being required to attend addiction, counseling, and parenting classes. She's also been assigned a caseworker who will be doing regular check-ins." "What about Sarah? Is she staying at home?" "For now, yes." CPS determined that while the situation isn't ideal, it doesn't currently meet the threshold for removal. Sarah's basic needs are being met. ESA, she has food, shelter, and clothing. The mother's drinking is problematic, but there's no evidence of physical abuse. I felt frustrated by that decision, but I I knew CPS had limited resources and had to focus on the most severe cases. However, Principal Martinez continued, there are some conditions in place. Sarah's mother has to maintain employment, attend her required meetings, and allow regular home visits. If any of those conditions are violated, they'll reassess the placement. How is Sarah handling all of this? Not well, according to Miss Walsh. She feels responsible for getting her mother in trouble, and she's angry with the school for reporting the situation. She specifically mentioned feeling betrayed by you. That hit me like a physical blow. Sarah felt betrayed by me. The one person she'd trusted enough to confide in had turned around and reported her family to the authorities. From her perspective, I'd probably made everything worse. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's attendance was sporadic. When she did come to class, she was withdrawn and hostile. She'd answer direct questions with as few words as possible and ignore any attempts at normal conversation. The bright, engaging student I'd known was gone, replaced by someone who clearly wanted nothing to do with me or school in general. Her grades started slipping for the first time since I'd known her. Other teachers started asking me what was going on with Sarah. I couldn't tell them the details because of privacy concerns, but I said she was dealing with some family issues and asked them to be patient with her. One afternoon in late April, about a month after the CPS investigation, Sarah stayed after class. I thought maybe she was ready to talk, to work through some of the anger she was obviously feeling. Instead, she stood by my desk and looked at me with more pain in her eyes than any 15-year-old should have to carry. She hates me now, she said quietly. Who hates you? My mom. She says I ruined everything, that we were fine before I started talking to people at school about our business. My heart broke for her. Sarah, you didn't ruin anything. The situation was already bad. We just tried to get help. Help? She laughed bitterly. You want to know what your help did? She lost her job because she had to keep leaving work for meetings and counseling sessions. Now we can't pay rent. We might get evicted. I hadn't considered that consequence. Sarah's mother had been functional enough to maintain employment, and now that was gone because of the conditions CPS had put in place. And the worst part, Sarah continued, is that she's drinking more now, not less. She says the stress of having social workers watching her all the time makes her need it more. Sarah, that's not your fault. None of this is your fault. Isn't it? She asked. I'm the one who told you about the bike. I'm the one who couldn't just keep walking to school and keeping my mouth shut. Everything was manageable before. Now it's all falling apart. She left before I could respond, and I sat in my empty classroom feeling like the worst person in the world. That night, I called Miss Walsh to express my concerns about what Sarah had told me. The situation is definitely more challenging now, she admitted. The mother is struggling with the requirements we've put in place. But Mr. Davis, the alternative was leaving a minor child in a situation where she was functioning as a caretaker for an addicted parent. That's not sustainable or healthy. But what if the intervention makes things worse for Sarah in the short term? Sometimes things get worse before they get better. We're trying to break a cycle of dysfunction, and that's never easy. But the goal is Sarah's long-term well-being. I understood the logic, but logic didn't make me feel better about Sarah's current suffering. 2 weeks later, everything came to a head. It was a Tuesday morning, and Sarah hadn't been to school in 3 days. Around 10 a.m., I got a call from the main office asking me to come down immediately. When I got there, I found Sarah sitting in one of the chairs outside Principal Martinez's office, crying. She looked up when she saw me, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look away. Mr. Davis, she said, I need help. Principal Martinez invited us into her office and closed the door. Sarah came in this morning and said she wanted to talk to someone about her situation at home, Principal Martinez explained. Sarah took a shaky breath and looked at me. You were right, she said, about everything, and I'm sorry I was so angry with you. You don't need to apologize. Yes, I do, she interrupted, because I blamed you for trying to help me, and meanwhile, everything kept getting worse. She told us what had happened over the past few days. Her mother had missed 2 counseling sessions and stopped returning calls from the caseworker. She'd been drinking heavily and had brought home different men from bars, some of whom made Sarah uncomfortable. Sunday night, she didn't come home at all, Sarah said. I waited up all night, worried something had happened to her. When she finally showed up Monday afternoon, she was with some guy I'd never seen before, and they were both drunk. Sarah paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. The guy she was with, he kept making comments about me, about how I was developing and asking my mom if I had a boyfriend. When she passed out on the couch, he tried to come into my room. The rage that shot through me was instantaneous and intense. Did he hurt you? No, she said quickly. I locked my door and climbed out my window. I spent the night in the park down the street. When I came back yesterday morning, they were both gone, but the apartment was trashed, and there was a note from the landlord saying we had 3 days to pay rent or we'd be evicted. Principal Martinez had been taking notes while Sarah talked. Now she set down her pen and leaned forward. Sarah, I'm proud of you for coming to us. What you've described is exactly the kind of situation that CPS needs to know about immediately. I know, Sarah said. That's why I'm here. I can't keep trying to take care of her. And I can't keep putting myself in danger because I feel guilty about leaving her. The rest of that day was a blur of phone calls, meetings, and paperwork. Miss Walsh came back to the school, interviewed Sarah again, and made arrangements for temporary emergency placement with a foster family. Sarah would be staying with the Hendersons, a couple in their 50s who had been fostering teenagers for over a decade. They lived about 10 minutes from the school, so Sarah could finish out her sophomore year without having to transfer. What about my mom? Sarah asked as we were wrapping up the meeting. She'll have opportunities to get treatment and work toward reunification, Miss Walsh explained. But that's going to depend on her making some serious changes. Sarah nodded, but I could see the grief in her eyes. Despite everything her mother had put her through, she still loved her and felt guilty about this outcome. That afternoon, Sarah went home with Miss Walsh to pack some belongings before going to the Hendersons' house. I offered to drive her, but she said she needed to do this part on her own. The next few days were quiet. Sarah came to school, participated in class discussions for the first time in weeks, and seemed to be adjusting to her new living situation. She looked healthier, like she was actually getting enough sleep and regular meals, but I could tell she was still processing everything that had happened. The following Monday, she stayed after class again. "Mr. Davis, I need to tell you something." I waited for her to continue. "When this all started, when you first asked me what was wrong, I thought you were just being nosy, like you were trying to get gossip or something to talk about in the teacher's lounge. I can understand why you might think that. But then, when you got me the bike, I realized you actually cared. That scared me because I'd gotten used to not having adults in my life who put my needs first. I didn't know how to handle someone actually trying to help me." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "And then when CPS got involved, I was so angry because I thought you'd betrayed me. I thought you'd taken my trust and used it against me. But really, you were the first person who saw that what was happening to me wasn't normal or okay." "Sarah, let me finish," she said. "I spent 3 years thinking it was my job to take care of my mom, that if I just tried harder, loved her enough, was responsible enough, I could fix her drinking problem. But you helped me realize that wasn't my job, that I was allowed to be a kid, even if my mom couldn't be a parent." I had tears in my eyes by the time she finished speaking. "I'm proud of you," I said. "It takes incredible courage to ask for help, especially when it means making such a difficult decision about your family." "The Hendersons are nice," she said. "Mrs. Henderson is teaching me how to cook real meals, not just heating up frozen stuff. And Mr. Henderson is helping me with my math homework. They treat me like their daughter." "How does that feel?" "Good, really good, but also weird. Like I don't deserve it or something." "You deserve to have adults in your life who prioritize your well-being," I said. "That's not too much to ask for." Over the remaining weeks of the school year, Sarah continued to thrive. Her grades improved dramatically. She started participating in class discussions with enthusiasm again. She even joined the creative writing club and submitted some pieces to the school literary magazine. The transformation was remarkable, but I knew it wasn't complete. Healing from that kind of childhood trauma would be a long process, and there would probably be setbacks along the way. In mid-May, about a month after Sarah had gone into foster care, Miss Walsh called me with an update on her mother's situation. "She's completed the addiction counseling program," she told me, "and she's been sober for 6 weeks now. She's also found a new job and an apartment." "That's great news. Does that mean Sarah can go home?" "That's going to be Sarah's decision. She's old enough to have input in the placement decision, and she's expressed some ambivalence about returning home right now." I wasn't surprised. Sarah was finally in a stable, healthy environment. The idea of going back to a situation that had caused her so much stress, even if it was improved, would be daunting. A few days later, Sarah asked to talk to me after class again. "Miss Walsh says my mom wants me to come home," she said. "How do you feel about that?" Confused. "I love my mom, and I'm glad she's getting help, but I'm also scared that if I go back, everything will just go back to the way it was before." "What does your gut tell you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "That I'm not ready, that I need more time to be a normal teenager before I go back to worrying about whether my mom is okay all the time." "That sounds like a very mature decision." "Miss Walsh says I can visit with her regularly, and if things continue to go well, maybe I can move back in a few months. But for now, I want to stay with the Hendersons." I was proud of her for making that choice, even though I knew it couldn't have been easy. The last day of school came in early June. Sarah stopped by my classroom to say goodbye before summer break. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for everything, for caring enough to notice when something was wrong, for getting me that first bike, for reporting to CPS even when I asked you not to, for supporting me through all of this." "You don't need to thank me, Sarah. You did all the hard work, but I couldn't have done it without knowing that at least one adult believed I deserved better. That changed everything for me." She handed me a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this for the literary magazine, but I wanted you to have a copy too." After she left, I unfolded the paper and read her essay. It was titled "Learning to Ask for Help," and it detailed her experience over the past year. The writing was beautiful, honest, and hopeful. She talked about the shame of hiding her family's problems, the fear of reaching out to adults, and the relief of finally being in a safe environment. The last paragraph made me cry. I used to think that asking for help was a sign of weakness, that it meant I was giving up on the people I loved. But now I understand that sometimes asking for help is the strongest thing you can do. It takes courage to admit that a situation is beyond your ability to fix. And sometimes, getting help doesn't just save you, it saves the people you love too. My mom is getting better now, not because I was managing her addiction for her, but because professionals intervened and gave her the resources she actually needed. I'm learning that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for someone else's problems. Real love means wanting what's best for both of you, even when that's hard. That summer, Sarah stayed with the Hendersons and took a creative writing class at the community college. She also started seeing a therapist to work through some of the trauma from her childhood. According to Principal Martinez, who kept in touch with Miss Walsh, Sarah's mother was maintaining her sobriety and working consistently. When school started again in the fall, Sarah was back in my junior-level English class. She looked healthy, happy, and confident in a way I hadn't seen since I'd first met her as a sophomore. On the first day of class, she raised her hand during our discussion about summer reading. "Mr. Davis, do you remember when you taught us about protagonists and antagonists last year?" Of course. I was thinking about how sometimes in real life, the person who seems like the antagonist, like the person making your life difficult, is actually trying trying to help you become the protagonist of your own story." She looked right at me when she said it, and I knew she was talking about our experience together. "That's a very insightful observation, Sarah." The rest of the class looked confused by the exchange, but Sarah just smiled and continued with her analysis of the summer reading assignment. That fall, Sarah decided to stay with the Hendersons permanently. She was thriving in their home, and while she maintained regular contact with her mother, she felt that returning to that environment would be detrimental to her own growth and healing. Her mother, to her credit, supported that decision. In one of her supervised visits, she told Sarah that she was proud of her for choosing stability and that she understood why Sarah needed to prioritize her own well-being. By the time Sarah graduated high school 2 years later, she had been accepted to several colleges with partial scholarships based on her academic performance and her essay about overcoming adversity. She chose to attend the state university about 2 hours away, where she planned to major in social work. At graduation, both her foster parents and her biological mother were in the audience. It was the first time they'd all been in the same room together, but somehow it worked. Sarah had created a new kind of family structure that allowed her to maintain relationships with everyone who cared about her while prioritizing her own needs and safety. After the ceremony, Sarah found me in the crowd. "I got into every school I applied to," she told me proudly. "I'm not surprised. You're an exceptional young woman. I want you to know that I'm going to study social work because of what we went through together. I want to be the person for other kids that Miss Walsh was for me and that you were for me. You're going to be amazing at it," I said, and I meant it. Sarah had learned something that many adults never figure out, that asking for help isn't giving up, it's taking control. That sometimes the people who challenge us the most are the ones who believe in us the most. And that healing is possible, even from the most difficult circumstances, when you have support and when you're willing to do the work. As I watched her walk across that stage to receive her diploma, surrounded by people who loved her and supported her dreams, I thought about how different things could have been if she'd never found the courage to tell me why she was walking to school every day. Sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion can change the entire trajectory of someone's life. I'd simply noticed that a good student was struggling and asked what was wrong. But for Sarah, that question opened the door to a completely different future. The phone calls from her mother had stopped years ago, but I still remembered them clearly. At the time, they'd seemed like evidence of a woman who was angry and defensive about her drinking problem. Now I understood them as the desperate actions of someone who was losing control of her life and lashing out at anyone who threatened the dysfunction she'd grown dependent on. Sarah's mother had eventually completed a more intensive addiction program and had been sober for over 3 years by the time Sarah graduated. They had rebuilt their relationship, but on different terms. Sarah was no longer her mother's caretaker, and her mother was no longer Sarah's primary responsibility. I kept the essay Sarah had written junior year in my desk drawer, and I'd pull it out sometimes when I was dealing with other difficult situations with students. It reminded me that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their coping mechanisms, even when they beg you to. Not every story like Sarah's has a happy ending. I've had other students over the years dealing with similar issues, and not all of them were ready or able to accept help when it was offered. But Sarah's story taught me to keep trying, to keep noticing when students are struggling, and to keep believing that intervention can make a difference. Looking back now, I realize that Sarah taught me as much as I taught her. She taught me about resilience, about the difference between helping and enabling, and about the courage it takes to choose an uncertain but healthy future over a familiar but destructive present. Most importantly, she taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to participate in their dysfunction, even when they hate you for it in the moment. As I watched Sarah walk across that graduation stage, I thought about the 15-year-old girl who used to walk an hour and a half to school every morning, carrying the weight of her mother's addiction and her own misplaced sense of responsibility. That girl had grown into a young woman who understood her own worth, who had healthy relationships with supportive adults, and who was planning to dedicate her career to helping other kids in similar situations. It had been a long journey, with many difficult moments and setbacks along the way, but Sarah had not only survived her circumstances, she had transformed them into purpose and strength. After the graduation ceremony, as families took pictures and said their goodbyes, Sarah's foster mother, Mrs. Henderson, approached me. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for seeing that Sarah needed help and for having the courage to act on that. I know it wasn't easy, especially when she was angry with you." "Sarah did all the real work," I replied. "I just asked a question. Sometimes that's all it takes," she said. One person caring enough to ask the right question at the right time. As I drove home from the graduation ceremony, I thought about all the students I'd taught over the years, and all the ones I would teach in the years to come. How many of them were walking to school every morning, carrying burdens that no teenager should have to carry? How many were protecting family secrets that were slowly destroying their futures? Sarah's story reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. Not just to teach literature and writing skills, but to be present in young people's lives during some of their most formative and vulnerable years. To notice when something is wrong, to care enough to ask difficult questions, and to be brave enough to act when action is needed. The next school year, I made sure to pay closer attention to my students' patterns, to notice when someone who was usually punctual started showing up late, when an engaged student became withdrawn, when a happy kid stopped smiling. I couldn't save every student who was struggling, but I could at least make sure they knew that someone noticed and someone cared. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything.